Awesome. Today we are live with Graham Allchurch. He is the head of brand and campaigns at Your Golf Travel, the director at YU, and covers industries such as brand marketing, content strategy, golf marketing, and sports marketing consultancy. So, Graham has a lot of experience in some really awesome and interesting niches, and we are very excited to have him on the podcast. He has over 14 years of experience within marketing teams and has covered the head of content, director of digital marketing, and head of brand and campaigns. So, Graham, thank you so much for
Hello.
coming on
That's all right.
on the
Thank you.
webinar today.
No, thank you for having me. Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're really excited to get into discussion today. So, Graham, just to kick things off, do you have any tips on how teams can better communicate internally as well as cross departmentally, and how do you consider that important that teams are aligned cross departmentally as well?
Yes, I consider that very important. I mean, one thing you'll probably get from me is that, like, I think a lot of these softer skills, when it comes to leadership, it's far more important than the kind of technical proficiency that a lot of people will have probably relied on to get them to that point. Actually, what happens, I think, once you get to a leadership position is it's almost like made or you're almost it's almost make or break by how you can navigate the political kind of environment sometimes in an office, in a team. So communication is absolutely key for that. And when you're in a management position, you have to manage up a lot more. So you're going to have more access to the senior management team. You might be directly speaking to the CEO and the founder and the CFO and all these people that you might not have had to deal with before. But then you're probably going to be thrown into the mix and working alongside the head of sales, the head of HR, and things like that. You probably wouldn't have had that much to do with them before. So, and then you have to think about actually leading your team yourself. So there's actually like three distinct groups of people that you need to be able to communicate well with and work well with. And communication is at the heart of that, really. And in terms of tips for being able to do it, I mean, it's not necessarily a communication tip itself, but I just think people need to spend the time really listening and understanding kind of everybody that you identify as a key stakeholder that you're going to have to work with, have a good relationship with. You really need to understand them as people, kind of personally and professionally. So, what are their challenges? What are their ambitions? What are their aims? How might their challenges and aims conflict with yours potentially? Um, how might they kind of marry up with yours? Um, so I think there's a lot of it is about learning really at the start and understanding them as people and understanding how they like to be communicated with. And some people prefer big long emails with lots of details. Some people want it just really, so it is understanding that it's not a one size fits all strategy to communication. I think you have to um, accept that everybody's different and you have to tailor the way that you communicate differently depending on the people that you're speaking to, really. So yeah, I'd always say you need to spend time really understanding the people that you're working with and that you want to have a good relationship with first.
Definitely. And I know, Graham, you mentioned about soft skills at the start there as well. When you were sort of more junior, was there like a leadership person or a person in charge of you that sort of inspired you, or anything that they sort of done that you're sort of incorporated into your sort of leadership now?
Yeah, I mean the best managers I've had, I feel like I think the best things that they've done is kind of what I've said there is that they've got to know you as a person. And I think some managers aren't very adaptable, so it's like
Yeah.
they have one way of operating, and it doesn't matter who they're talking to, they'll always be the same, and that'll work for some people and it won't work with other people. But the best managers I've always had have been adaptable, so they'll understand kind of how I work best and what I maybe need um, to motivate me, or if I've done something not very good, they know the best way to kind of tell me about that to to elicit a positive reaction, because that's ultimately what you want. Um, so that's a big part of it. I think really, like, honesty and transparency and clarity is really important. Like people hate uncertainty. I think especially like if you don't know where you're going in your career, or you don't know how you're performing, or you don't know what people think about you, that's like an awful place. That's an awful place to be in. You can kind of sit there full of anxiety. But if you know what everyone thinks of you, and you know where they think you need to improve, and they're very open and honest about that. I'm not saying that they're like, it's constructive criticism. It's feedback with the aim of saying to you, look, I want you to succeed in your role, Graham. This is what I think you can do to do better. I think that's really key. So, yeah, you always want to know where you stand with your manager and where they think you're maybe, where you've got areas to develop. I think it's just good to get it on the table and lay it out there. But again, that worked for me. What might work for other people in the team might be completely
Yeah.
different, and you have to get to know that as the manager. So,
Awesome.
Perfect.
And you mentioned before the call that you work with a lot of junior SEOs as well. Do you have any advice to our junior SEOs that may be watching for if they may be interested in leveling up their career to a managerial position? What sort of like transition steps do they need to cover? For example, soft skills is one that's quite important.
yeah.
Yeah, do you have any that you could mention?
Yeah, so I think, SEOs typically very technical, and they're very proficient technically, and are very good at kind of focusing on the task at hand. And what can be quite uncomfortable, I think, for junior SEOs in particular as they move up the ranks a little more, is that you just, your responsibilities change. So you probably are going to have to spend less time in the work and more time directing people. And that means giving up a certain level of control sometimes, because you can't do it all yourself. And the SEOs that I've worked with have all really enjoyed getting stuck in. And there's always room for, managers who are willing to get their hands dirty are like gold dust, like really. So that's really good. But there is like a level of control that you have to give up. You do have to learn to delegate and feel comfortable delegating. And again, it's like what I said before, you do have to kind of understand how you're going to navigate the political environment of the wider business, which some SEOs might not be, that comfortable with, but
Yeah.
it's necessary, really. So, and as well, it's about understanding more commercially. So it's really understanding the wider goals of the business and how SEO fits into that. It goes from SEO being your world to SEO being a part of your world, but you're in this bigger universe now, and you have to think about a lot more than just that one discipline. So yeah, and I think that's all a case of preparation, and just if that is something that you want to do, and you do want to go into leadership positions and management positions, it's looking at yourself honestly and thinking, okay, what am I good at, and maybe what are the skills I'm going to need as a leader, and how can I work on them in advance to get myself more comfortable with them. It's always good to be prepared, so that when
Exactly.
if you transition into that role, you're not like, oh my god, what am I doing here? Like, this is crazy. So yeah, that's what I'd say to that.
Yeah,
And
no, I was actually just brings me on to what I was going to say, because I think it was whenever you were with ICOM, you went from head of content to director of digital marketing.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who have taken, not necessarily right up to director level, but who have taken a promotion within internally, and how do they manage that relationship from working as beside somebody now to now that relationship dynamic changing to their managing, almost they could have made it quite friendly with them, and now they're sort of in that management position. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, it can be challenging, and honestly, people talk about imposter syndrome, people talk about how to avoid it. Like, it's inevitable, I think, a lot of the times. Like, and it's just something to accept. Right? You just have to accept that you're in a new role. You don't know everything, and it's okay to not know everything. I think one of the traps I fell into personally is that, you know, when you do get a promotion internally, you almost want to prove yourself to people, and it becomes a bit of a selfish endeavor. So it kind of becomes, you forget about the needs of the business, and that's why you're there ultimately, and that's why you've been promoted, is to serve the business better. But you can start to think like, oh, you know, what do people think about this? Like, I'm really going to have to put my stamp on this role. And in my experience, that's like the worst mindset to have, because you start, you're not natural. You're kind of trying to be someone that you're not, probably. If you're trying to be, you might think you need to be authoritative, and you feel like you might need to tell people who you mates before, like, no, I'm a manager now. And it's like, it's not necessary, really. Like, there is a way, I think, that you can maintain friendships with people, but just with healthy boundaries. And I think it's all about being open and honest and transparent at the start, and having conversations with the people that maybe were your peers before and now you're managing, and laying it all out on the table and understanding how they feel about it. But ultimately remembering that the business is the important thing here for all of you. You know, you're all in it together to deliver for the business at the end of the day, and hopefully you can put any personal kind of matters behind you, and everyone should be focused on
Yeah,
the business goal. But it is tricky, because
definitely.
it does change dynamics, and it's not always nice. But I do think there is a way to be natural and be yourself and be human about it, without turning into like this management robot,
Yeah,
and getting people to buy into what you want to do as well. I think that's an important thing, as well as making sure that if you've got, you want to get people on board with you, and you want people to buy into a mission, really, a shared mission. I think that's a good way to do it. But yeah, it is tricky, certainly. But
definitely.
it can be solved with being a normal person, I think.
Excellent. And then I suppose on the flip side, obviously you've experienced like moving across to completely external. Is there any advice that you would give somebody moving into a different management position to sort of incorporate in their sort of first 90 days or so?
Yeah, the first 90 days. So
Or 30 maybe, if you want to
yeah,
shorten it down a
30.
bit.
Yeah, no, 90 days is good, isn't it? I think that's it. It's like, so for me in marketing in general, so that's obviously my role is like wider marketing, but I think the same applies for specific disciplines. So if you want to be head of SEO, or whatever it is, I think that what you find is that more responsibility is on you now, because you're the head of that thing. So you feel like you've got more control, and there's more pressure on you to deliver. But because you're higher up, you're like reporting to people who are probably less likely to understand what you're doing. So if you're head of SEO, you're starting to report now, instead of before. If you were a junior SEO and you're reporting to head of SEO understands SEO. That's why they're in that position. You've
Yeah.
got an understanding between you. Once you go up to head of SEO, you're probably reporting into a head of marketing who probably isn't an SEO expert. Or you might be, if you're higher up, you might be reporting into a CEO, a founder, managing director. They're probably not going to understand SEO as well as your previous boss. Um, so a lot of it to me is like, you do have to try and gain trust and influence internally, because you could be the best SEO in the world, you can be the best marketer in the world, but if you're not getting approval and sign off from your bosses, if you're coming to them with strategies and saying, this is what I want to do, and they're saying, I don't get it, I don't want you to do that, I want you to do something different, ultimately you're just going to end up executing their ideas,
Mhm.
even though they know less than you about it, and you're on the hook for it. You're responsible for the results of it. And that's not a nice situation to get yourself into. So I'd always say the first thing I would do is, yes, definitely think about strategy and things like that. But I really would spend time trying to get a good rapport and level of understanding, and educate the people that need educating, as much as possible about what you're trying to do above you. That's important, and it's something that people don't always do necessarily, but I think it's crucial, really.
Definitely. No, I know we were speaking to Eli Schwartz not so long ago, and he was saying that the key now, especially for SEO, is for people to start understanding how to speak in terms of sort of revenue and bottom line rather than sort of SEO metrics. So do you have any advice on how to do that, or is there any platforms where you can sort of learn that, or does it just have to have sort of commercial acumen?
I think if you can understand what your bosses think is important, what's important to them. For some people it might be all about profitability, and you can get your hands on the business plan. Most businesses will have a business plan, and you can probably look at your discipline and the work you do and see how it directly influences points on the business plan. So it might be that I don't know, profitability is important. So there's ways that you can look at what you do and think like, okay, well, that is almost like a domino effect. If I'm good at this, then that'll make this better in the business, and higher up that'll make this better. So you can kind of tie it all back. So if you can start to talk to them in language they understand and link it directly back to the goals of the business, then that's really good. That's really important. Also, I think with more technical disciplines, I just find like sometimes we overcomplicate things. Like I used to talk to clients and like bosses in analogies like all the time and metaphors, and you obviously don't want to offend people by dumbing it down too much and making it sound like they're like stupid. But quite often you can just bring things back to like, okay, managers and CEOs and things, they understand the concept of a pipeline, like a sales pipeline. SEO is a very specific part of that marketing engine that drives the pipeline. So if you talk to managers and more commercial people about how your work is driving people into the pipeline so that you can convert people and turn them into, then it's much easier. Also, if you take it offline and think about analogies where it's like bricks and mortar, if you imagine you've got a shop, for instance, there's lots of work that an SEO does that you could just directly transfer to the work of a shop. So it's like, okay, you've started up a new shop in a high street. How are you going to get people? You sell shoes. How are you going to get people in? And then once people are in there, how are you going to make sure their experience is as positive as possible? Everything is labeled correctly so they know where everything is. Pricing is, everything's got a price. It's really easy to queue up and pay. And then on the way out, what you're doing to re-engage them, or you're handing them a flyer or something, so you can transfer things directly to real world scenarios, I think, and just make it a little bit easier to understand.
I like that. Brilliant.
You guys kind of partially answered my transition question, but just to build off of that, are there 3 skills that you could mention that you look for in any of the SEOs that you look for within your own team? And then also to add to that, are there any 3 skills that you would look for in someone worthy of being a head of SEO? So someone in your position.
So I mean, a lot of it for me is always like the people who stand out to me. It's all even at a junior role, it's the soft skills and the attitude that kind of stands out to me, because I feel like you can teach the work, you can teach somebody, you can invest time in people and they'll pick up the skills, the technical skills you need to do a job, but you can't really teach attitude. You can't really teach attitude. Like you can't really change people that much. People do change, but so I feel like if you see that they've got a promising attitude, and really it depends on what your company values. It was going to be different for a lot of companies, but if you've got people in there who seem to embody the core values that you want in your people, they're the people I would always go to try and fast track or get up the ranks a little bit more. They would always stand out to me, because that's hard to find, but you can find people who can do the work. You can't always find people who can motivate people and are really good team players and They really care about their work and they've got great attention to detail. They're great with people. They're great with clients. They understand how to talk commercially to people higher up and sell their ideas. That stuff's all really important. Yeah, you have to be good in your role, but you can train for that. You can't really train for the other stuff that well.
Definitely. And you mentioned, Graham, about motivation there. How difficult is it now that a lot of places have moved to sort of a remote setting, or do you have any tips to sort of keep your team motivated remotely or hybrid?
I think it's tricky really, because obviously I've done both.
Yeah.
But I feel like it all comes down to trust anyway, and it all comes down to like knowing that you've got the right people in your team first. Because when you trust people, I think people struggle with the idea of managing remotely because they maybe just don't trust their team. And I would say, well, maybe you haven't got the right team then
Yeah.
if you don't trust them, because you should be able to leave them to, and if you've got measures of if you've got KPIs and you've got clear goals and expectations, you can see the output of what they're doing, then there's an easy way to see if they're doing what they should be doing. That's fine. But in terms of motivating people, I think it is like you do need to spend time with them. You probably need to make sure you've got more time booked in with them for quick one-to-ones, FaceTime, because you're not getting that like you would get in the office. To keep them really connected with, and again, like I talked about having a mission to buy into, like you've got to reinforce that sometimes, and you've got to remind people like, oh, that was really good what you did, because if you can make people feel like they've got a real central role to play in the journey the business is going on, and you're reminding them of that all the time, then I think that's really good. But yeah, I think motivation for me is all about, again, everyone's got different motivations. They might eventually want to be an entrepreneur, or they might want to, they've got a family situation that they want to provide for. Everyone's different. So I think it's understanding what truly motivates people to get out of bed in the morning first. But remotely, then it's making sure that you've got enough FaceTime with them. It's not real FaceTime, but you're speaking to them probably more regularly than you would normally do if you're in an office. Yeah.
Brilliant.
This is more of a personal question, but were there any bottlenecks that you struggled with in the past year as a leader, and how did you identify them, the problem, and resolve it? This can also be with including the team as well.
Yeah, bottlenecks. I mean, thinking back to my time when I was at an agency, and I mean, it's pretty similar when you're in-house as well, to be fair. I mean, it's getting approval, I think. So a big problem I think that most companies have that I've worked with is that it's too reactive. Marketing is too reactive generally. We don't plan far ahead enough in advance. So everything, you're kind of flying on the seat of your pants a little bit all the time. So if you haven't planned far enough in advance and you go to the stakeholders, the people who need to sign it off, whether that's the client or whether that's your managers, and they're not doing it quickly, and they're probably not going to do it quickly because they're very busy and they've got other pressing matter. It's understandable why they wouldn't. Then suddenly you're panicking and you're suddenly trying to cram things. And that's when things get stressful in the marketing department. I just think we just need to do things a lot. We just need to do things a lot earlier. I think a lot of it is about acceptance. Like, you're not probably going to change the fact that it takes a while to get sign off from clients or from managers, because they do have lots of other priorities. So if you can't change that, what can you change yourself? And to me, it's like planning further in advance, over communicating, really communicating your vision. So you're not having to explain everything for the first time, like a week before you want to launch something. You've kind of done the work in the background over a longer period of time. So when I think of bottlenecks, the first thing that jumps to mind is just they haven't told us whether we can go on this or not yet. And then suddenly you start to panic, but really you're in control of that.
Definitely. And just to sort of touch on that as well, or add to it, was there any sort of surprises or bottlenecks whenever you moved from agency to in-house that you weren't expecting, or you didn't realize that this is how it works?
No, not really. I mean, what's really good about in-house, I mean, I loved my time in an agency, and I would never have done it like any other way, because the opportunity to work on multiple different businesses in different industries and become comfortable with that and speak to
Mhm.
different types of people with different goals is like unbelievable experience for any marketer. Like, if you can do that well, then you can go in-house where you've got all the attention on one brand, one industry, one company, and you can apply everything that you've learned in an agency setting just to what you can focus that just on one company. It's really powerful, really. So I don't know if there are any surprises necessarily. I just think, in a positive way, you feel like you can achieve more because you've just got more hours to spend working on that one business.
And would that be your advice then to sort of junior marketers to start off in that sort of agency setting where it is a bit faster paced? You do get sort of a lot higher exposure rate to clients and
Yeah,
different sort of
definitely.
challenges. Yeah.
I personally would. I mean, it just depends on the individual, but I feel like if you can do agency world, you can definitely do in-house. I don't necessarily know that's true the other way around. It's a completely different pace, completely different environment. But that said, like, some of the best people I've hired have been from an in-house background who have maybe got a more well-rounded understanding of what it means to, like, I find sometimes that in-house marketers maybe understand a bit more commercially about the
Yeah.
business and a bit more about, like, we've really got to drive leads and we've really got to drive conversions and sales. They're a bit more commercially focused, I think. That's just my experience.
Yeah.
But definitely in terms of like being comfortable in that environment and the setting, um, and just learning to get results on quite a limited, like, if you're in an agency and you've got a client, you know that you might only have like a couple of days, a week, a month to deliver results. That really means that you focus on the stuff that's going to drive the needle. And then when you can apply that to when you've got more time, then that's really going to help you. But everyone's different, but I would recommend that personally. It worked for me, I think.
Brilliant.
Awesome. And just as the director at YU, how important is networking for you? Do you attend networking events, or do you primarily work off of like social medias and things like that? And yeah, do you have any tips to junior SEOs that are looking to maybe enhance their networking side of things?
Yeah, I definitely try to. And I think it's all marketing, really, isn't it? I mean, if
Yeah.
you like, if you think about it, there's different channels to get leads, and you kind of have to be as visible as possible wherever you can be. If your potential customers are over here and they're over there and they're over there, you want to try and be across all those places. So if your potential customers are at networking groups and things like that, then you want to be there. Otherwise, you're potentially missing out. So yeah, I do try to. And again, it's good to you tend to get to know people on a personal level first, which is always helpful. Like, if how I think marketing should work is that there's that funnel. If people have to be aware of you first, and they have to like you first to even consider you when it comes to them needing your services. So I would much rather spend my time kind of building relationships with people that may or may not go anywhere, than just focusing on the hard sell like all the time, just in general. So networking is really good for that. For junior SEOs, yeah, I think there's lots of industry conferences and events and things like that. I think SEO is a really good industry for that. I would advise people to try and do that as much as possible. And if it ends up that you want to move jobs, or if there's somebody that you meet that you think, oh, I really would like to work with that person or for that person, It's much easier to do if you've met them in person. It's much easier to find people like that at networking events. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend it. What is there to lose really? Like, and again, you might not feel comfortable doing it if you don't consider yourself a really sociable person. If that's the case, then you're just building on those social skills that you're going to need when you're further up the ladder, and you're pushing yourself out of the comfort zone, which to me is only like a good thing. So yeah.
And
Excellent.
do you consider utilizing LinkedIn and Twitter, things like that, important, especially for just networking and engaging with others and learning?
Yeah, I think so. Well, definitely learning. I think people in general should try and listen more than they speak, and try and learn from people. So I think both of those platforms are obviously can be very good for increasing your knowledge in certain areas or understanding how different people do things. I think sometimes you've got to filter out the pure promotional stuff that it doesn't serve anyone other than that person because they're trying to sell some stuff, which that's typical of every network really. But I think any platform where you can see different people's opinions, different people's way of operating is really good, because as well, like, I worked in one agency for like 9 years. If it wasn't for places like Twitter and LinkedIn, I would have only known how ICOM operated.
Yeah.
And you need probably more points of reference than that,
Yeah.
as you move up, because what you've learned at ICOM might not transfer into this new business. So yeah, I'm all for it. Yeah, definitely try and get as much information as you can from people. Try and see what people are talking about, and see what the industry's saying.
Awesome. Definitely broaden your horizons.
Yes.
Awesome. That hit our half-an-hour mark. Thank you so much for coming on, Graham.
That's okay.
It was lovely chatting, and yeah, it was lovely discussing all these different topics. And where can people find you? Primarily on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn, or my website, sell-your-soul.co.uk. Sell your soul, but there's dashes in there. That's for my kind of my own consultancy business. But like you said, I work with Your Golf Travel as well. But LinkedIn or there is best.
Perfect. Well, we'll put this up on YouTube and Spotify and link it all where we need to link it.
Brilliant.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and hope you have a lovely weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Cheers.